Ask the Podcast Coach for March 1st, 2025.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music. It means it is Saturday morning. It is time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from theschoolofpodcasting.com, and joining me right over there is the one and only Jim Cullison from theaverageguy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings. Happy Saturday morning to you, Dave. Always good to be here on Ask the Podcast Coach. Happy March to you.
It's one of those where like, wait, February's over? Oh, like didn't we just like, okay, all right, I guess we're doing March. All right, it's weird,
fine.
Which means we're going to go from cold to windy. So,
yeah. We had big winds here yesterday. So it's spring is on its way. I think, well, okay, it's fall spring right now. Let's just be really clear. America, this is fall spring. You're going to have one more winter before it hits. So don't get too sucked into this.
Yeah. Hey, Brian is asking, he's like, hey, first time in, and I have a question. If you would be looking for a question from we're looking for all questions. We're going to talk about some quick sponsors. We get that out of the way firsthand. Now you can either go to askthepodcastcoach.com/question, or if you just want to throw it in the chat room, either one is fine. But it is the first thing we do, which is always great fun, is, Jim loves coffee. He's got an awesome cup over there from our buddy Dan, which we'll talk about in a second. But we do the coffee pour, and the coffee pour, which I understand does make people want to go to the bathroom. Just the whole, like, just quit doing that. No, I've got it.
Wait a minute. Gotta go.
Yeah,
I'll be right back.
But that coffee pour is brought to you by our good friend Mark over at podcastbranding.co. So if you're new to the show and you've never heard about Mark, oh man, are you in the right place at the right time? Mark really does anything that you want your artwork to look good. So he does podcast artwork. He's probably closing in on 600 pieces of artwork for different people. But he does so much more than artwork. So if you need a full website, go over and check out congressionaldish.com. That's an example of his stuff. He just makes you look amazing. And unlike some person on, let's say, Fiverr, is where they go, oh, hey, here's your stuff. Here's your one image. Mark's going to sit down with you one-on-one. He's going to listen to your show. He wants to make sure that your brand from start to finish is in alignment for maximum impact with your audience. Because really, when you think about it, the first thing I got to do is click you, right? That artwork grabs their attention, and you want to make sure everything's in alignment. So when there's only one place to go to podcastbranding.co and tell Mark that Dave and Jim sent you.
And of course, big thanks to our good friend Dan Lefebvre over there, based on a true story podcast.com. Looking like he's wrapped up. Dan, I don't know, you can throw it in chat if you want to, but it looks like he's wrapping up his Pinkerton series. Part 3 is available out there with Ron Hillard, and you might want to check it out today if you're into that. If you're into that, even if you're not, it's a great podcast. Check it out today. 3 parts all ready for you. Based on a true story podcast.com. And Dan, as always, he's always in the chat. Thanks for your sponsorship.
Yeah, absolutely. Boy, Dave's having a bad morning. Dave, thanks. Always great to see you in the chat room. How's it going? Hopefully better than me, watching on my wife's laptop. I think my hard drive died, so my Mac's down. That is not a good way to start the day, my friend.
No, sorry.
I know. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with the whole Elgato Stream Deck, because when I installed software and I had to reboot it, and then sometimes I just know that if Elgato updates, then you have to update Ecamm, or if Ecamm updates, you have to update and it just seems like every now and then I go to push the button to turn my lights off, and it's like, no, not gonna do it. And you're like, oh, hold on. And then like this morning I rebooted and that whole 9 yards. But yeah, Brian, if you have a question, he says, I co-host the Christian Principles podcast. Happy. That's kind of what we do.
Right there in chat.
Yeah, we are. We're very, what's the word? Loose here. Like if somebody said, well, what are we going to talk about today on the show? We got a couple things about Skype and some other stuff, but for the most part, we just kind of go wherever the chat room wants to go. And right now they want to go where there are warm Pop-Tarts and coffee, says Chris from castahead.net. Pop-Tarts, so good and yet so bad, is, Chris says the first thing I got to do is click you. I may repurpose that. Yeah, that's it sounds almost like a rap thing. Baby wanna click you,
Mm,
kind of
mm, uh.
yeah. Yeah. So and then Chris also says, I do hate the Elgato updates. It creates additional profiles. I have like 50 empty profiles I need to clean up. Yeah, it's just one of those things where there are times when you kind of go, is it worth it? I remember when I could turn on my lights, so I had a little remote and I could just go boop. And as long as I didn't lose the remote, I was okay. And now it's like their time, like the other night when it first did this, I'm like, hold on. I gotta pull up my phone because I've got the Elgato thing on my phone. And let's let's jump to everybody's talking about this one. So we had a question came in. Poor person said, hello, since I'm not an expert, I want to ask you if you guys believe this is a good approach to record a Skype call between me and a teacher. I messed around a bit, and this is what I came up to. I have OBS. I got to start recording the call, blah, blah, blah. To which I said, well, yeah, that's not, depending on when you're going to do it, Skype is shutting down May 5th. And the thing that was kind of cool about Skype, back in the day, man, that was everybody used Skype, which is weird because you had to have a Skype account. And in today's world, that's like, wait, what? You've got to install the software and create an account. And I remember I had 2 Skype accounts. So if I had somebody like, what do you mean? I'm like, okay, here, log in with this email. The password is password 1 so that they didn't have to set up an account. And I know Glenn the Geek still uses it because you could get a Skype out number. And so you could call, because sometimes if you get celebrities, they're like, I'm not hopping on. Now they might today. I think everybody's used to Zoom or whatever. But yeah, Skype is going away May 5th. Now, here's the thing, because we said a while ago, they, when Blog Talk Radio was going away in January, and we started talking about that in like November, and I've had someone in last month that were like, hey, my stuff isn't updating. Then I look in and their feed is Blog Talk Radio. And I'm like, now I can't really tell what happened, like, because Blog Talk Radio is owned by the same company that does Spreaker. And I'm not sure if Spreaker could help out with them. It was a weird situation. And the person I was dealing with wasn't super versed in how a podcast worked. But when somebody says something is going away and they put out a press release saying, this is going away on this date, now is the time, if you're using that, to find that. And that's where, I guess, if I was looking for something for phones, I would either get a Rodecaster Duo, where I can connect the phone via Bluetooth, or the good old-fashioned Zoom PodTrack P4, which is interesting because on the side, it uses a TRRS cable, and that just makes it sound like it was done 4 million years ago, because we've all got either lightning cables, or I'm not sure what's coming out of an Android phone these days, probably USB-C when I think about it.
USB-C. Yeah, USB-C.
And so you would need a lightning or USB-C to TRRS cable and to get that to work. So feel free to jump in. Just go to askthepodcastcoach.com/question. If you have a question, it's that way every week. We don't really mention that a whole lot. I mean, it's written right up here, but we need someone going, if you have a question for Jim and Dave, go to askthepodcastcoach.com/question. Now, if you're listening to this after the show, you can go to askthepodcastcoach.com/voicemail and leave it there. And here's something that's interesting. I had that inserted at the end of every show, which either means people aren't listening to the end of the show, which could be a possibility. But we've never had a voicemail. Nobody's ever left a voicemail, to where you kind of go, I don't think the audience wants that. Like, they don't need that. They're either going to do it live. We occasionally get an email, but and there he is. All right. So coming to the stage, it's going to be Mark from I think Mark's from, is Mark the same guy as the Christian Principles podcast? He's nodding his head. He is. So we're going to jump over to this because it looks fun before we do this. And then we're going to put Mark in the middle like that. So, Mark.
This has been sketchy. Can you hear us, Mark?
So hopefully all is well. So we can hear you. So hopefully you can hear us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can hear me within a moment. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Okay.
I think we're picking up the wrong mic, but that's okay.
Yeah, I think we have the check your mic settings.
Yeah.
There.
If you do the old, it's.
Yeah. That's okay. It's
we can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, you're fine.
You're super kind. I appreciate that. So anyway, I'll be quick and try to mute myself and then change my mic. We are the Christian Principles Podcast. Our super specific audience are Christian school administrators. So
nice.
not public school administrators who are Christians, but Christian school administrators. So, thousands of Christian schools, we believe that's where we're called to blah, blah, blah. Anyway, there's an organization named the Herzog Foundation that found us and partner with us really early. I mean, we are like 115 followers between Spotify and Apple. We go twice a week. It's a 25-minute episode, and we're doing the minutia of schooling, like literally what should the Christian school's chair look like in his office or be like in his or her office. And that kind of crazy minutia stuff, but stuff that college tours and senior trips and things like that. Anyway, this organization, the Herzog Foundation, it's out there to give money to see Christian Ed grow. One of the things they have done is started to work with their own network of podcasts. So there's the Herzog Foundation network of podcasts, and they give us money per episode, money that we would never have thought would come in per episode. I mean, we didn't do that. I'm sure many say this, but as long as we started for the money anyway. But we never thought we'd be getting this kind of money right now.
Yeah.
We believe that at the moment, our audio, even though I'm not representing that very well right now, our audio is where it needs to be. Our cameras are where they need to be, since we're mostly on the audio side anyway. Yeah. My question is, sorry for the intro. The question is, if you had $100 an episode and you felt as though your audio and your video for the moment for your population was where it needed to be, where would you be sticking that money? And assuming that it's not meant to line pockets, it's meant to grow the institution which you are celebrating. What would you do?
Well, if you're going to use it for advertising, you want to figure out, the goal is to get podcast listeners. So a flyer isn't really a great idea unless you're going to hand it out to, you know what I mean? So a lot of times people advertise in other apps, or they'll advertise if there's like another show that you think has your target audience, then advertise on their show. But that's really one of the ways because we need listeners is the thing. And so either advertise on an app in the Christian, category or something of that nature, because you've got audio, you got video. So many people think, I'm going to take my show to the next level, and I'm going to go from this $200 microphone to a $400 microphone, and it sounds this much better. And nobody was saying you had bad audio. So it's money in your pocket. Sometimes you're like, I got to spend this somehow. Jim, what would you do?
Chat room's got some good advice. Save it. I know this is weird, but save it for now. If it's nothing screaming at you to spend it on, right, from a advertising standpoint. I had an old CFO that taught me this equation, and it's money equals options. And so having some cash in the bank, so to speak, when those things do come out, because there's always those times when something pops up and you're like, I wish I had $400 or $500. Well, you would in 5 months, right? If it's $100. Now, if you've got to show results in the first quarter on this money that they're giving you, that's a little bit of a different. Yeah. That's a little different, right? But I would say in your case, because you're such a hyper niche, I think your audience is hard to find. But they're at conferences, they're networked in.
That's what I was thinking.
For you, if I was going to spend any money, I would spend money on going to the places where these people are and meeting them face to face and having a podcast card or a QR code or something, right? They say, hey, we'd love to have you join us. The other thing I might think about doing is, do you guys have guests? Do these administrators come on as guests, or how do you do that?
So we have, I don't know if this is a better, I think I tried to change it. We'll see if it works or not. But we have
it's okay.
Yeah.
And again, this does not reflect on Mark. This is an Ecamm thing.
Oh man. So anyway, we every episode we spotlight a Christian administrator. So we have a list of we just published 74 on Thursday morning. So we've had 74 different Christian administrators spotlighted, and we've had maybe 10 to 12 guests come on. Only a couple of them have actually been Christian administrators. Others have been, there was a military recruiter, there was someone who did the biblical worldview development in Christian schools, all kinds of stuff. But yes, we are in every single episode reaching out and trying to develop that community. And I think, Dave, your book, the Red Book, I got it for Christmas anyway.
Oh, nice.
Dave, you've written a book?
I know,
right?
That's what they
Have
say.
you? Really? Okay.
Wait,
whatever. I never heard of it before.
Do you
but,
mean profit from your podcast? Proven strategies to turn your listeners into a livelihood? Well, thank you.
That's
Whoever bought that?
Never heard of that before.
It was my best listener, my mom, So
nice.
So one of the things that you had mentioned was the horse show guy who went to the super niche horse show and became there. I contacted, based on that recommendation, I contacted a couple of the Christian school conferences that we would see those guys face to face. So I said, hey, I think I can deliver, Lord willing, I can deliver value to you and to your sponsors in a way they've never had a sponsor before. If you name us the official podcast of this conference, just give me a sponsor level table. We'll get ourselves there. You give me that. So thank you for that. That was a godsend. And through your book, it was a blessing to do that. And we're on our way to sit in those conferences and to meet those people, to rub those shoulders, and hopefully, gain those one-on-one contacts. So I thank you for that. Yes, absolutely. And the thoughts would be tremendous.
Well, that would be, as we were sitting here thinking, I was like, that's what I'd save the money for, to go to those events. Adam Curry just launched this thing called Godcaster.fm, and it's for podcasters, it's for radio stations. But he went to the National Religious Broadcasters event, which was last week, and he got to keynote a couple other things. And he said, that was exactly the right audience to be in front of, because it's radio people that are like, hey, radio's dying. Anybody got anything else we can do here? And he's like, yes, look, and you can have your own app and blah, blah, blah. So when you get in front of your target audience, it's a beautiful thing. So I think that's the other thing I'd use the money for, because as much as, even if it's, $300 a ticket, and you're like, okay, but then you go, oh, but the hotel's $180 a night. It's for 3 nights. Okay, there's another $600, and then the flight is, another, blah blah. It's like all of a sudden you're like, wow, I don't know that you can go to a conference without sneezing away $1,000. It's hard unless it's in driving distance or something like that. I know I've got one coming up in August in Cleveland, and I was like, oh. But I've also learned, just to stick on if you're going to a conference and it's in driving distance, Cleveland's like an hour, more or less, 45 minutes from me. But you want to hang out at night, because that's where all the great talks happen after the sessions. And I would do that and then drive home. So I got home really late, and then I would have to get up early because it was an hour to drive back to the hotel. And by the end of it, I was so tired. I was like, I think next year I'm just going to spend the extra $400 for a hotel stay for a couple nights and keep my sanity. So, but
one more thing to consider if you're thinking of a place to spend that money, and that would be guest gifts. So it's sometimes not a bad idea to just, hey, thank you for thank you for being on the show. Here's a $25, Amazon card, whatever. It's just because then sometimes when you're asking other guests, they'll check before they go on, they'll check who's been on before, and they might talk to, because it's such a tight niche that you're in, they probably all know each other. And so to say, yeah, I was on the show, they even sent me a nice handwritten note with a gift, or whatever, whatever you do. So there may be some of those where it's appropriate. There may be some of those where it just kind of greases the skids a little bit for your your guests in the future, and people then are like, they're a little more inclined to say yes as you move along in the podcast.
So
Yeah.
interesting enough, again, I think mostly based from mostly. Oh, is that my mic now is actually working?
Yeah,
So
that's
Okay.
it's good.
I
Awesome.
picked the right one. So so interestingly enough, you say that. So we on the first check that came in, so to speak,
Yeah.
we spent on hitting all of those that we had spotlighted as Christian administrators with the $5 gift card and a card sent out to their school in their
Nice.
name, with us, asking their follow, and then money also in the same way for our guests. So it seems like you're suggesting what we're doing, and I'm thankful for
Good.
that. Hopefully
Good.
we're on the right path in that way. So that's a
Awesome.
blessing. If there's anything else, I'd be happy to hear, but you've given me plenty of time. I appreciate it. Have a good day.
You bet.
Well, no,
Yeah, you bet.
don't leave. No, first of all,
sure,
Mark,
sure.
we got 90 minutes to fill. You can hang around, But Chris says create a place for other Christian administrators. So whether it's a Facebook group, I'm a huge fan of Heartbeat. I know it's whatever it is, $39, I think, a month now for Heartbeat. But if you can charge people a nominal fee, just because one of the things that's great about events is those conversations you do have in the hallway. And so if you can provide that, and it's like, oh man, I can't do this without spending $1,000 to go to an event, you might want to think about having because the beautiful thing about a community, because that's what Glenn does, Glenn the Geek, the horse guy, he's got a group of people that basically critique every show he does, but he's always getting ideas from them, and they give him feedback. So it's this cool content loop where the community gives you something to talk about, so you talk about it, and then they tell you, yeah, that was a good job of talking about it, but I wish you would have done this, or can you talk about this now, or whatever. So that might be something else you think about just in terms of doing that. And then when you, like Mark over at practicalprepping.info, he's in 4 gazillion trillion people now in his Facebook group. And he says, what's interesting is they always throw in, hey, this week's episode is about so-and-so and such and such. And he goes, and what's interesting is there are people that join that group that have no idea they have a podcast. And then they're like, oh, and then, oh, by the way, you can, follow the show over here. And so it's sometimes a community is a great way to just, because podcasting's hard. After a while, you're like, I think we did all 13 topics we have. What do we do now? And so that community can help do that. Chris also says maybe some merch, some print-on-demand services. You can buy T-shirts and mugs, etc. Because again, they might want to show, hey, I'm part of this club too.
But some branding at let's say you're going to this conference, they've given you a table, the branding associated. Like, it's good if you are dressed appropriately for the brand or whatever, to have branded shirts or whatever. That can sometimes elevate. You go, you do something like that, and you look the part, and you look the podcast. That I think people remember that more, and they may come back to it. So,
yeah, I remember Glenn had a backdrop that just said Horse Radio Network on it, and then he brought 2 microphones with some foam, whatever you call the windscreens on his microphones. They weren't plugged into anything, but it was just 2 microphones, so it looked like, hey, there's something going on over there. So yeah, and then just don't be shy. If you're going to events, have either a business card with a QR code or just a QR code on your phone to get people to that. Go ahead, Jim. You were going to say something.
I was going to say, we also, maybe one more thought. We also used to live podcast from a conference because you have your audience and your guests there. I don't know. Have you thought about that? Have you done anything like that?
So for the first one we pursued, it'll be 2 single-day events, and I wrote up kind of like a work statement and sent it out to the head. And I said what we would do is we would make sure that beforehand we would be plugging. We have an episode that was basically hey, this is where it is. This is what it is. We're going to have leadership come on. Once we're there, we're going to make sure, based on Dave's recommendation, that as many sponsors who want to come and give a 3-minute spotlight, they do. And we'll have a very specific time they can come do that. We'll make sure that when we are there, we are grabbing anybody who wants to come on, because who doesn't want to hear their name? If some want to hear them, some don't, but they want to hear themselves. We'll give you access to all of those episodes once they're edited, and we'll also do a live from the event and 1 follow-up afterwards. Good. So for that, you give us a sponsor table and a spot, and the first leadership group was pumped for it. So we'll see what the rest come back to. So
yeah, I've done quite a few of those where we've partnered with technology conferences, and then I said, hey, can I get access to your keynotes? We'll interview them. We'll publish these things. You're thinking right along those lines.
Yeah.
And in fact,
Awesome.
haven't done it in a couple years. And just a couple months ago, they called me back and they were like, "Hey, remember when we used to do these?"
Yeah.
Right? They're like, "Are you interested in doing it again?" We haven't nailed down the details yet, but I think you're right on track for
Yeah.
something like that. It's a great way to partner with those. And you get a lot of lift. I mean, you get all the motivations. The key on this, right, is you get all the motivations lined up, right? The conference is motivated to help you be successful because you're going to publish some unique things they can't do. You're motivated because they're giving you access to people you may not normally get access to, maybe in some cases. And so you get those two lined up, and it's just a sweet partnership. So it sounds like you're off to the races on that one. That's
Yeah.
great.
The fun part of the Glenn
You have water.
strategy.
You don't have water boiling or any. The house isn't going to burn down or anything. We don't want to hold you if you
Yeah.
don't want to. If you,
No, I
so to
just
make
feel
sure
bad
you're
already
okay.
taking up. I just feel bad taking up so much time already.
Oh,
you know,
no, it's a
No.
good topic. Good
Yeah.
topic. But
The other part of the Glenn strategy is if they have speakers at this event, you interview the speakers, that grows your network. And then in his case, he interviewed the sponsors. And that's when they're like, well, wait a minute, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I do this. And back then it was early days. So you'd call, oh, I do this internet radio show, because nobody knew what a podcast was. And, they're like, well, how much is it to sponsor on that? And he's I think the last time I told him, he still has sponsors that were from that very first show. Because if you've got the right product for the right audience, it's cool.
Sure.
So
it is one of those things. If you're gonna do sponsorships, you've got one, right? Treat them well. Make sure they're well taken care of and well spotlighted and those kinds of things. But make sure you have spaces for others, just placeholders, things they can jump into. We invented this. Dave and I invented this. Well, in the early days, I was just drinking coffee down here.
right.
And so we would pour the coffee, and then eventually we're like, that could be a sponsored thing.
Yeah.
And Mark picked up on it, and Dan picked up on it. And so I think it's good to think about, maybe if you had another sponsor, what would you do with them? Where would you put them? Can you create something like that where they can fit in nicely, right? So just maybe sometimes we don't think about, we think, well, I got to have a sponsor to think about it. And I think you actually need to pre-think about it. Like, where would I put them in? What would it be? How much is it? When the sponsor asks you, well, how much is it? You can't say, the second you go, they're like, I'm out. Like, this guy does not know what's going on. You got to say, it's $100.
Well,
That's it.
to that point, and again, I'm kind of just pitching your book right now, I think. But when
Don't do that. I don't want to sell more. No, please. Thank you.
No, stop.
Yeah.
But yeah, in that space when it was discussed concerning looking at sponsorships, or is that your only way forward? Is there something else? And you repeat this throughout, but you start with your integrity and no listeners.
That's
and
it.
of course, in my realm, I'm going to put a personal value on that, even past this hobby that I'm doing right now, professionally, personally, spiritually, morally. I'm going to base a lot on that. And so in that same, we did have somebody, a peer podcast from that network came to us and offered us some affiliate. And I have a friend, his name is Kent Boucher with First Gen Hunter. And his podcast is just taken off. It's crazy, just a college friend. And he mentioned that the whole affiliate marketing thing, I was just getting through chapter 9 on the book with affiliate marketing anyway, and the whole affiliate marketing, he said he tries to basically stay away from it almost completely if it's not a discount code that they type in when they're at their checkout spot, because going through the link and the difficulty of going through the link versus whatever else. And even in this first foray with this peer coming to me and saying, hey, I think we could benefit each other, here's the 10 hours of work that you can do to maybe make nothing off of, I see what he's saying, and I said, I don't need, right now, I don't need that in my life. It's a blessing to do what we're doing, and with the one we have, I'd rather take the time and give them the spotlight right now than this back end. So even in the reviewing of your book, the reviewing of the chapter of your book, his commentary, it seems like that might be something to stick on a website, but ours is pretty much a
Yeah.
Google site right now. It's not really worth much. So I'm not even sure if we'll chase that down too
Wait,
hard at all.
do you mean this book?
I
Profit
mean
from
that
your
book.
podcast?
That
Available at
exact one.
profitfromyourpodcast.com?
There's a check in the mail to you, by the way.
Yeah,
There's a check
exactly.
in the mail.
And I know Randy had asked, how do I buy a autographed copy of that? Well, gee, is that at Profit from Your Podcast? Yeah. So, yeah, we did have some suggestions, especially about the community thing. And
We have a Facebook page, but I haven't set up a group yet. So we do
Yeah.
have a page, haven't done a group. And interesting, the reason we started it was because we could not find another podcast out there that was that niche.
Yeah.
There was not. It
Yeah.
was for Christian school administrators. Period. So the fact that the only ones we found, there was a group called Christian Administrators Think Tank on Facebook, and then there was one that was related to a certain association, a certain accreditation association.
Yeah.
But if you weren't in that accreditation association, you weren't going to get in there.
Right.
So yes, it was born out of even not being able to find those things. So thinking about having one of those groups and making our groups, that makes a lot of sense, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Todd the Gator is like, hey, you might want to look at Discord because it's free. Chris
Well, it's
from-
secure too. It's you're not dealing with Facebook. Like
Yeah.
that's the nice thing about Discord.
Oh, man.
Now
I
it's a separate login, right? All that other stuff.
Yeah.
But it is nice to. It's a little sparse looking, but it is nice from no ads. Some of those kinds of things.
Yeah, the Chris says congratulations because most people don't monetize this soon. But again, the power of the niche.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, for sure.
Ray from Around the Layout podcast, who wears a tuxedo, by the way, when he goes to an event. That's cool. He says price is only an issue in the absence of value. So know your value. And remember that you can have a newsletter and then you do the whole, oh, well, it's X amount to sponsor the show. It's X amount to be in the show notes and an X amount to be on the newsletter. And hey, right now we're running a special. Get all three, at a discounted rate, et cetera, et cetra. So, but man, it sounds like you're going in the right direction, which is cool.
It's good. Sounds good. Good. On your way out, tell us the name of the podcast and where people find it.
So it's just Christian Principles Podcast. We're on Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music. We do one of the episodes.
You don't have your website yet?
We do. It's ChristianPrinciplesPodcast.com.
There you go. There you go.
But it's for
definitely.
school administrators, right?
It is for anyone, but it's for school administrators who would want to come and see.
I would add a tagline then, because when you says Christian Principles Podcast, I'm kind of like, oh, it's a Jesus show. You know what I mean? And so
we're PLES, not PALS. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, well, which one is it? Is it PAL?
Yeah, we're the PAL. We're the
got it. Okay, well, that because I'm like, hey, okay, see, this is where
there's confusion in there. I mean,
there we go.
You might
Sure.
a tagline may clear some of that up. It's just a
Interesting.
thought. You don't have to say it all the time, but
plus you get to stuff more keywords in there without looking like a weenie. So
when you say that, you mean like when we're introducing the show, or
no, like hey, this book is called Profit from Your Podcast. But in the event, you were like, well, what is it about? Well, it's proven strategies to turn your listeners into a livelihood is the tagline. So it might be, and I'm just spitballing here, but, the water cooler for Christian principles to blah, blah, something like this one might be Ask the Podcast Coach, free podcast consulting, School of Podcasting, name of show, tagline, plan, launch, and grow your podcast.
What we've been saying is for and by Christian school administrators.
Bingo. There you go. So go into whoever you're hosting with and throw that in the title. And it's just more ways to get found. So
gotcha. Okay.
Hey, thanks for being brave and jumping in. I appreciate it. We don't get a lot who actually try to join us live. We get a lot of questions in the chat room, but
I'm dying to know behind the scenes, did it just say when you went to your audio, did it just say microphone, 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 microphone?
So if I go, I'm in whatever this is, Ecamm Live.
Ecamm, yeah.
I have options for communications, headset microphone, default headset microphone, speakerphone. So I had to take a guess as to which it was, because I'm running this through a Mayono interface, XLR. Well, it's got a lot more than just the XLR, but it's whatever this mic is through a Mayono interface XLR to my PC. Which
Sounds
man,
good now.
you go into depth. You seriously go into depth, Dave, on all that, and that was a a blessing and an insight as well in the book. So there was something else you brought up that I'm losing right now, but it was
Love
That's
the
all right.
book.
Well,
Love it.
the audiobook is fun because I go off script. So there are times that I'm like, hey, because the book is like, it's not ancient. It was 4 years ago. And especially I give people the PDF of the resource section. Like if you want to look at these, but I don't recommend any of these anymore because there's new stuff. And so, and I also need to make a community because somewhere in the book, there's a secret, like profitfromyourpodcast.com/something. I don't remember what the slash even is.
Apparently, it's a secret to you
It's
as
so
well.
secret. And at one point, it was a mighty network, and then I moved it, and I kind of blew that. That's one. If somebody said, "What's a regret?" I'm like, "Oh, I had a community and set this link, and then moved it, and blah blah blah." So we're now, I don't know where anybody knows where they're supposed to be for the super secret sauce stuff. So, but
what was the heartbeat tool you were speaking of?
Heartbeat, let me show you what Heartbeat is. Heartbeat.chat is the tool, and that's what I use. Now, here's the thing that's so funny is now you're going to get to see the admin view, but this is the School of Podcasting's community. So when I go to discussions, it's like, hey, so here you can see Neil just signed up. He's from Brisbane, Australia, right? So we've got that. And then I just have one channel for general discussion. There's a great, it's 90 minutes long, but the head of Patreon talked about how we're kind of, the algorithm is like, it giveth and it taketh away. So we've got that. We've got gear talk. I actually added this section a while ago. We talk a little AI over here. So speaking of Chris Stone, he's one of the awesome guys in there. We have events over here, so you can see, here are all the group coachings that are coming up here. So there's one today, by the way, from 1 to 2:30. So if you're a member of the School of Podcasting, so it's handy. I'm trying to figure out where I can go in here to show you things without showing too much, but I love it to death because it's also, I'm actually going to be, well, here, let me do this. You can also do courses in here, which I'm moving the School of Podcasting to a Heartbeat for this. And so if we go into, like I just updated this Buzzsprout one last night, and this is why there's no activity here because nobody can get to these yet, but I can easily kind of see what they would look like if I was a student. So it does courses, you can make your own kind of, like over here, there's a link. Well, thanks, Dave, that was helpful. That's a link to where the courses are now. If somebody wants to schedule a call with me, or if they want to send me a question, so you can add other things, not just what comes out of the box with that. So the more I got onto it, and they recently did an update to their payment processor that I was like, oh, this is done. Because I was lucky enough many moons ago, I actually...
Did you drop, Mark? Did he drop?
I didn't mean to. Let's see. Hold on. Oh, wait. Wrong button. I'm used to going to that. I'm used to going back to that.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Mark's like, what? I guess we're done. Sorry. Force of habit. But I was lucky enough to get Heartbeat on AppSumo. So I got a lifetime deal. So, and I'm if somebody can find what the price, I want to say it's $40 a month.
40 a month.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not
which,
cheap.
But if you had, 8 people giving you $5, but that's where, don't undervalue your thing. When I started the School of Podcasting, it was $5. And I had a friend of mine, luckily, happy birthday, Marcus, by the way, if you're listening. Yesterday was his birthday. And he said, Dave, can you tell me anything on the internet that's worth buying for $5? And I went, no. And he goes, yeah, exactly. Then I was like, so I eventually raised it to 20, and then it went to 50, and now it's basically $99 a month for the School of Podcasting. Like, why do you keep raising your prices? Because at $20 a month, I had people that would sign up and do nothing. And I'm like, I'm weird. I don't want my money for nothing, my chicks for free. I just, like, the whole point was you start a podcast, and then when people go, hey, where'd you learn how to podcast? You go, oh, go talk to Dave, and here's my affiliate link, and that whole 9 yards. And I found at 50, people started to actually make podcasts, and at $100 a month, Unless of course you buy a year where you get 2 months free. Then
So much pimping on
so
this
much
show,
pimping in
Dave.
this show.
So
Uh,
much.
yeah.
Stop it.
And then Brad, who's a member of the School of
Like I
Podcasting,
started
says,
that.
"Hey,
Sorry.
just join
that's
that." Yeah,
all right.
but
You did start it. It's your fault.
I did
Yeah.
start it. I did
You
start it.
started
Yeah,
it.
so
Fine.
Just
Anyway.
so you know.
that's what
Yeah.
Heartbeat is. I use it. Now, here's the funny thing. You ready for this? And I realize what is a community? It's where people come together that have a shared passion and blah blah blah. I still have a Facebook group because I have people that will only use Facebook. Because I said, hey, I think I'm going to kill the Facebook group. And they're like, no. And the other people are like, you will take it from my cold, dead hand, And I was like, okay. And then I'm like, but the real one's over here in Heartbeat. So I am now the guy that's cross-posting in both. Like if something's really good over there, and I realize that is the direct opposite of what a community is. Like having two communities because we can't agree on what the community is that. Yeah. So Chris
So
says,
Heartbeat is something they have to make their own account for on Heartbeat. It's not
Yeah.
as simple as that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's not, as far as I know, they don't have single sign-on yet. But it's an app, so it works on Android and iOS, and it works on the website. Because I know some people are like, I don't want to install another app. And I'm like, well, you can use the website. So it's, but when the courses are over there, then they're going to be there anyway. And I think that's what's really going to boost the community. And the people are like, well, what are we using Facebook for? And I'll go, exactly. So, and then we'll ditch it. Because I got kicked out of my own Facebook group because I said, hey, Lunch with Dave starts in 20 minutes. Then they're like, you're spamming. And then last week, I forget was something, Scott Johnson had asked, what was something that you thought was fine and ended up being very scary? And my friend George Robb has a song about squirrels. Look out for the squirrels. They're, they're all, they're cute and furry until you see them face to face. It's this weird kind of funny comedy song. Well, George's album cover is him naked, except for a big round circle with a question mark strategically placed. And so when I linked to the song on YouTube, here comes George with a big giant question mark. And Facebook was like, that is you. They took down my post because I violated. Apparently they didn't think George was in good shape, which he is. But that was when I was like, so I emailed George. I'm like, hey, just for the record, I'm not telling you to change your album cover, but maybe on YouTube, put some clothes on, would you? Doggone it, George. So, yeah.
Mark, thanks for coming in. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah,
we'll get you back to your Saturday morning.
Yeah.
No, this has been great. I appreciate it. Truly.
You bet.
Yeah,
You
man.
bet.
Have a good
Thanks
one.
for coming in. You bet.
We got somebody to come in live. Yay. So
It is possible. It is possible.
It is.
Let's just.
and plus
YouTube.
it's a game, it's almost like the wheel of names. It's like, okay, wheel of microphone choices. Which one will he pick and will it work?
Yeah, we eventually got it. We got it
Yeah.
on there. It was
He just keep
yeah.
trying. So, and he didn't sound horrible.
No.
Randy says when the Podfather points folks at Dave Jackson, then Dave Jackson knows his stuff. Yeah, he actually gave me another shout out on the Podcasting 2.0 show. He was talking about how he's giving demos to people for Godcaster.fm, which I am at this point. I think I'm going to go get a demo because I was like, wait a minute, I could use that for like all of my shows. I could make like a Power of Podcasting app and that whole nine. He's got me thinking. And he said, well, he goes, I teach people what's possible. He goes, and then I send him over to Dave because he can teach him the rest of the stuff. And I was like, excellent. Thank you, Podfather. It's always, it doesn't suck when Adam Curry shouts you out, you know? Yeah. Todd says he's afraid to play Mike Roulette. It's really, as I said, I go, first of all, he didn't sound, he had a little background noise going on because it is what it is, right? But, I think regular listeners of the show know that, the sound quality of somebody does not necessarily reflect their educational
listen, it's live, right? It's live. You're trying to come in and get this done. I was super impressed that he knew the contents of your book. I mean, I was expecting him at one point to go, from the book of Dave Jackson, chapter 3, verse 2. Dave saith that the podcasters shall only monetize on Tuesdays.
Yes.
Chapter
Not
12. He did not talk
two types of networks. Right. Yeah, exactly.
He knew the book. That was impressive. I mean, it's almost
It's
like they paid
interesting
him.
because like I wrote that book 5 years ago. If it's been out 4, I wrote it 5 years ago because it came out. In fact, there's somebody always says I should pick the lottery numbers because I think it's in the first chapter, maybe even in my introduction, where let's see here, but somewhere in it says you don't know. Oh yeah, one last thing as I write this, it's February 2020. Things may change by the time you read this.
Oh, for sure.
2020. So I wrote it right before the pandemic. And so it took a while to come out because it was my publisher, Skyhorse Publishing, kept downsizing people. And they're like, hey, Carla's going to be handling your book now. I'm like, great. And then like a month and a half later, okay, George is handling your book now. And I was like, so yeah. But, well, this is the other thing. You don't have to join in live. It's just fun.
Yeah.
Podtastic audio.
no.
I would join you, but I just woke up and I'm on the couch using my laptop, drinking my coffee after being out last night. Yeah, not a
No
problem.
worries. No.
So-
worries. It was a great question. It really was a nice.
Yeah.
It's a nice way. That's really what we're looking for. Is a really good question.
And I'll have to be sure and tell Glenn that people are still Glenn the geeking it. Like I told him, I said, dude, you are a verb. Shane Whaley, awesome supporter. One time I asked him how his show was going. He's like, oh man, I got this. And I ended up with a sponsor. And I'm like, what happened? And he goes, oh, I Glenn the geeked it. And I'm like, well, he's a verb. He goes, yeah, I went to, that's back when he did Tourpreneur. And there was this event for tours and tour guides and stuff. And he goes, I said, hey, I want to be the podcast for your event. And I goes, I did it and blah, blah, blah. He's like, so man, that strategy really works. Plus it got him right in the middle of people who should be listening to a show. So yeah, that was, that was one of the first tips that Glenn gave. And I was like, man, that is so good. So with that, we'll go on to our next question. I saw this one and was like, interesting. And that is, he says, doing a show about your industry. He says, my partner and I both work in the same industry, but in different disciplines. We have an idea for a podcast about the industry and are thinking about how we can make it a reality. One potential problem is that we both still work in the industry, so we'll be speaking about experiences and situations we've been in. I wondered if anyone thinks that would be an issue. I feel it's probably okay if we don't mention names or change potentially identifying details. Does anyone have any specific advice about this? Well, I mean, I do a podcast about the industry. People know where I work, but I guess my advice would be if you're going to say anything negative, explain why you think something isn't the way it should be or whatever. Because I always I want people to know my intentions. So if I'm like, hey, like I thought about this today because there was so stupid. I just want to hold this button down for just so, that YouTube has 1 billion podcast views. And when I saw it, I was, and so I explained to people because when I saw it, I was like, oh, here we go again. But consider the source. I'm a guy that works in podcasting support, and on a not daily basis, but it gets that way. I have people now that sign up at Podpage because you can sign up for a demo. So I've got a live podcaster sitting in front of me, and he's like, yeah, I tried to, do the thing where you put the thing in and it builds the site for you. He goes, it wouldn't work. And I go, oh, well, who are you hosting through? And they'll go like, well, I'm a podcaster on YouTube. And then I have to politely go, yeah, that's not really that's a YouTube podcast is what I tell them. And I go, we're looking for a podcast based on an RSS feed. And you can just see them like, wait, I'm like, this isn't really a podcast. I'm like, no, it's a show. But in terms of syndicating it everywhere, no. And so that's where when I see people say that, I'm like, oh, here we go. And now I'm going to get more people that go, hey, your pod page doesn't work, man. It's a piece of crap. And I'm like, no, you're not a podcaster. You're a YouTuber. And so when it comes to talking about the industry, I think if you give your why, so not everybody feels like I do, but this is why I feel so strongly about it, because I see it every day and have to go, nope, sorry, not a podcast. Okay, next up, what do you have? Hey man, this doesn't work. Sorry, not a podcast. You're a YouTuber. We can, go over to Blueberry and use their pod to or vid to pod service, and you too can be a podcaster. But right now you're technically a show, and a good show. You should grow your audience in the same way that maybe an audio person can grow their audience by doing video. A video person can definitely grow their audience by doing audio. So I don't know, Jim, talking about the industry, any thoughts?
No.
Yeah. The other thing, keep in mind the internet writes in ink. So if you do say anything negative, or out of, it writes in ink because you're not going to be who you are 15 years from now. And I always use have we talked about the Amish porn thing on here before? Probably.
No.
Oh,
Do we have to?
It's safe. In the early days of building a better Dave, I was going to be blue. I was going to work blue. I was going to be edgy,
Oh.
And so like one of my first or second episodes, I did a thing about Amish porn that like, hey, if Amish people, because the whole thing is just weird concepts, like, hey, if this is this, then what's that? And so it was like, if Amish people don't have electricity, does that mean there's no Amish porn? Because, there's no cameras, there's no technology. And then I was like, well, if there was Amish porn, what would that be like? And then it was like, oh, Zebediah, plow my bean field and all this dirty talk that was very Amish-like. It was very, very strange. And so I am dating a woman, and it's time to meet the kids because we're getting serious. So I get to meet the kids, and one is 16, I think, at the time. And so she went and Googled Dave Jackson.
Oh,
and guess that came up. Yep,
Yeah.
Amish porn. And guess who she called? Grandma. Now, luckily, Grandma thought it was pretty funny, but you got to be careful. I do know this was a long time ago. I don't know if you could legally do this now, but you could back in like 2006. There was a guy, PK and J, and I can't remember if it was PK or J, but one of them was not just an atheist, but like a flaming atheist, like really, really just did not like God at all. And his boss found his show and was like, that's who's working for me? And somehow let him go. And I'm like, I don't know you're allowed to fire people for their religious or non-religious beliefs. But he got let go because they're like, yeah, we kind of don't want you on the team. And I was like, So, or if you're like, my boss is such an idiot, I can't believe, and then your boss finds your show. It's like, well, I didn't say his name. Yeah, but, So I think he's on the right path of don't say where you work. Don't, so.
Well, I mean, or do and be appropriate.
Yeah.
Like, that's
Yeah.
Some, I think and I'm in this boat, right? I was podcasting before I started
Right.
podcasting at work, and I've had to be very, very clear about where the line is drawn at sometimes is between what's my stuff and what's the stuff for Gallup. And I don't have any problem mentioning that. It's out there, it's public.
Right.
And listen, I talk about some of the struggles that we've had behind the scenes because I think some of them are valuable. They're not secrets.
Yeah.
It's sometimes internally and even externally, but sometimes internally, folks would be talking about things they thought I was doing on the podcast. And I was like, I don't think so. And then I'd be like, everything we do is public, right? Like,
Yeah.
You can go actually listen to it. And it's not, it's that we don't keep it secret. It's not so
Yeah.
it's, I think, I do think for podcasters where it's a hobby, and depending on who you work for, your job, or how you're doing it, it is a little bit of a delicate dance in
Yeah.
there. And I think more, this is my own opinion. I think more disclosure, more communication to your employer, more expectations of what you're doing, and making sure you don't have to do this, by the way, but again, this is my opinion. The more clear you are on what you're doing, the better it is between you and your employer. And I just, I made it really clear on my podcast. This is why I do some advertising. I have gotten some stuff, but I've made it really clear. That's just a hobby.
Yeah.
Like this, my full time, my responsibilities lie in what I do at work, right? That's my full time role. That's what I do. I spend most of my time doing that. Does that mean that's all I can do? No. I mean, it's a hobby. I have fun with it, but I try to make sure it doesn't become, because you and I talk about this all the time, Dave. Hobby podcasting can quickly become all consuming. And
Oh,
so you have
yeah.
to protect yourself, right? All of a sudden, it's like, okay, maybe you're still working for somebody else. So you have
Yeah.
to be careful in that space that you're dividing the hours appropriately. Listen, you have to figure that out. No one can tell you what's right or wrong. That's your relationship with your employer and what you're doing. There's some advice that people can give in there on some things that you can do, but ultimately it comes down to you and your relationship with your employer and their understanding of what you're doing. In my case, more communication is better than less. So
Well,
that's my advice there.
that's what Ray from Around the Layout podcast says. He says, I think you should let your employer know. Better they find out up front than to find you later and have it be an issue. It might provide an opportunity. Maybe they'll get behind it and promote it and put it in their newsletter or whatever, things like that. Um, yeah. Randy Black apparently went and found the Amish porn episode. That's
Oh
back.
boy.
That's back from October 23rd, 2006. Yeah, that was what was funny about that was, and on deck we've got Todd the Gator. I actually had a Cleveland Brown football player that apparently had been following me, and I think that's back when I used to have my phone number on my website. And he called the phone number, and I forget the guy's name, but I should remember, but it was like a famous, he's like, hey, I listen to your show. He's like, why are you working blue? And I'm like, what? He's like, why are you working blue, man? Then I'm like, I don't know. I thought I'd try. He's like, it's not you. Like, what should, I was like, because there was a thing about online dating and, they look amazing and then you show up and they look like Aunt B and Aunt B doesn't give me wood. You're just like, it's like, yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It's not you.
Yeah. Yeah. Brad says you should do an episode on the most unique and maybe strangest podcast topic. For me, that is always chameleon breeding. The Chameleon Breeder podcast. Had him on the show many moons ago. But anyway, let's coming to the stage, or should we thank our awesome supporters? Todd,
Yeah.
I can see you behind the scenes. Can you shake your head? Can you hang around while I thank the awesome supporters? Okay, he's good to go. Excellent. All right. So with that, let's go over here. Yes, our awesome supporters give me more than enough reason to get up every Saturday and do this, and we appreciate all of them. You can find them at askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome, and that's where you can also sign up. And the show is brought to you by the School of Podcasting. Maybe that's what I should be doing now. It's like live from the School of Podcasting studios. It's Ask the Podcast Coach, right? And you've ever seen people do that where they treat everything like it's a NASCAR sticker, just throw it on it. We're not going to do the Home Gadget Geeks, Wheel of Names or whatever. But yeah, School of Podcasting. We got courses, we got coaching. You saw the community day. If you watch the video, use the coupon code COACH, and that comes with the 30-day money-back guarantee. And when you go to askthepodcastcoach.com, that is Podpage. And we make websites for podcasters that don't want to learn how to code. And we're actually, there's some things going on behind the scenes now that are making them prettier. So not that they were ugly in the first place, but we're adding a bit to the look of it. So check it out at trypodpage.com. And we're using Ecamm Live to stream live. You can find that at askthepodcastcoach.com/Ecamm. And Ecamm has 2 M's because it's good. And if you need more Jim Collison, and who doesn't, because, doggone it, just look at him. He's amazing. Go over to theaverageguy.tv. And it's time to figure out who the supporter of the week is. And so when we go over to the Wheel o' Names, who will it be? Will it be Jody Krangle? Will it be Max Trescott, Ed Sullivan, Ralph from Ask Ralph Podcast, Craig from AI Goes to College? Well, we're going to do a shuffle, and we're going to click spin, and round it goes. Who is going to win? It looks like, is it Jody can she hang on? No, it's the girls from Keep the Flame Alive. If you're into the Olympics, and this is one of the cool things about a podcast, they got to go to the Olympics as press. How cool is that? Keep the Flame Alive pod.com. Ladies, thank you for your awesome support. I deeply appreciate that. And speaking of, the show and support, if you think about it, does this show save you time? Does it save you money? Maybe a headache or two? Does it keep you educated? Did we make you laugh this morning as you're chomping down your Captain Crunch? And remember, don't eat it too quick or it rips up the top of your mouth, And if you let it go too long, then Captain Crunch is just soggy mush, and that's no fun. If you need more of those kind of tips, then go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And thanks for all the awesome supporters. And coming to the stage, you know him, you love him, the one and only Todd the Gator is he's gonna hop in right now into box number 2, and there he is. How's it going, buddy?
Look at that.
Look at that. He got lucky. Right microphone. Sounds great. Amazing.
I hit the right number. Yeah, that's good. I know I tried this once before, and I think you heard everything in my room except my mic. But hopefully I got it taken care of this time. I've been podcasting for 6 years now. I've got a great community. It's all about a gaming podcast, and you guys have heard me talk about it before. And I'm going into more of a lifestyle podcast. This has been something that's been rattling around in my head for probably a year now. I hang out with a lot of younger people, 20 to 40-year-olds, I would say. And I'm well in my 50s now, and I'm creating a podcast based on life, not advice, but trials and tribulations from my life, where I want to share and help people. And just, I've built my own business from scratch. I've been married for 32 years. I've got a lot of life experience that I want to share with other people.
Yep.
Kind of like that big brother that's like, hey, don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that. You're going to get hurt. And I need some advice from you guys, because I know you guys have done multiple podcasts before. And what I'm trying to figure out is I'm not stopping my podcast. I'm going to keep doing my gaming podcast, but I want to do it right this time. I want to make sure I have plenty of episodes out. I want to make sure I'm not, under the gun every week. It's going to be a weekly, like a 30-minute quick podcast with just like a story or life story or something like that. And what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to figure out, should I bank a bunch of episodes ahead of time where I have a little bit of, because I have to run another community and another podcast.
Right.
Or should it be something where I just release episode 0 and start going with it? I've already recorded episode 0, my intros and my outro music, everything's all done. My daughter's working on all the artwork and stuff. So
nice.
You guys have done this a lot more than I have. I'm kind of a late bloomer to podcasting here. So what do you guys think? If it was you, what would you do?
For me, and I try to do this, and I'm horrible at it, having a show or two in the can, shall we say, is really handy for those times when you're like, oh, wait, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I'll just use, because if your stuff's kind of evergreen and it's just a story and it's helpful, it can sit there on the shelf, and that's fine. So that can help in those stressful situations when, whatever, somebody gets sick or whatever. Those really do come in handy. And there are times when, like, I actually was contemplating going to Florida. I had a friend die this week, and I was going to go to his funeral. And besides the fact that unless I want to fly Frontier, tickets are $700. And I was like, that's the chunk of change. But then I was thinking, if I do this, and I'm like, oh, wait, I've got to record 2 episodes then, one for this week and one for next week. And that's when having one in the can is really, really handy. I don't know, Jim, any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, one of the techniques, Todd, that we use at Gallup is we record 2 episodes at a time. It's the batch processing concept, right? So if you're going to get together and you're going to do the effort, chances are you could actually early on record 2 back to back, make them a little bit shorter. So, you're not on there forever. Then it's easy. In 3 weeks, you're 3 weeks ahead. if you do it that
Mm.
way. And we have 34, we do these seasons of 34 episodes. Clifton Strengths has 34 themes, so we do these 34 episodes. I do 17 weeks of recording, and we record 2 each time. And so you get a live show. We have a live show audience that shows up just for those recordings. They're better done live anyway, so that's the way we do it. And then my team behind the scenes we get ahead, just naturally ahead, because we only release one a week. So that's been a technique that I've used for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years now, of getting, just getting ahead a little bit. And I think it's not a bad idea to have a few in the bank, especially if you want to be regular. It's not required. You can release these things whenever you want, right? But if you
Right.
feel like the regular, once, we're going to release every Monday at 6 a.m., that's our schedule. If you feel like that's really, really important, then yeah, some batch processing can get you ahead on that. I don't know.
And
Do you feel like the regular schedule is a make or break for the podcast, or can it go a week and 2 weeks and then a week, or I don't know. What are your thoughts, Todd?
Well, I actually had another gaming podcast related to my first podcast where I was helping new players get into the game, and I just closed that one down because I realized it was just too much. I put a lot of work in my live shows on YouTube. I write the scripts, everything. I kind of have a schedule of how I do everything every week, and I have a co-host too that I have to collaborate with. And I'm just trying to. I mean, this is how extreme I was thinking about. I was thinking about putting together like 20 episodes, and then just not having it saying in the beginning like this is episode blank.
Yeah.
I'm just going to open up with a cold open with my story or whatever my topic is for the episode, and then I can decide where to place them in. But I always worry about something not being timely or
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
getting, and it's going to be pretty evergreen, I think. But it's about my life. It's about everything I've accomplished, trial and error. So,
yeah,
is that extreme?
Todd, be careful on the batch process that you don't think you can sit down. I'm not saying you're saying this, but I want to warn people. Don't feel like sitting down for 5 or 6 hours and cranking out 2 or 3 episodes is a good idea, because fatigue sets in after a while. I mean, Dave and I go 90 minutes, and when we're done here, I couldn't do another 90-minute show. We couldn't do this back to back. The second show would suffer. So I think you need you also have to figure out your pacing on that. I can do 2 shows back to back because they're 15-minute shows. That's pretty easy to do. If they're longer form, it gets a little more difficult. Dave, your eyes told me you have something else to say there.
Well, just amen to that, especially if you're doing interviews and people like, okay, on Mondays, I'm going to interview 4 people. And you're like, because what happens by the time you get to the third one, you're like, oh man, because interviews, your brain is going crazy while you're doing interviews. And then what happens is, maybe you schedule them out a half hour in between. So during that half hour, your adrenaline goes, and you're like, oh, and then it's like, oh, I got another one. And I forget that when I do presentations at events, because I used to do that every day. And I remember there were times if I didn't get a ton of sleep, I'm like, hey, when I'm driving home, I got a 35-minute drive home. And that adrenaline is like, and I'm like, I'm driving here. I don't really want to take a nap right now. So but as Jim was saying, if they're little short episodes and you don't have to worry about if it's just a solo show, that's fine. I would recommend the book Storyworthy. Love this book by Matthew Dix, because
I've listened to the audio. It's an awesome book.
Yeah, because sometimes we have stories and then we kind of butcher them through the way we deliver them. And there are other times like the episode I just did last night for Building a Better Dave. I kind of had I'm going to start here. And I didn't really overthink it. And I'm fine with that. That whole show, like that particular, because I was talking about my buddy Neil, it was over at 2 a.m. And it was just, I got done and I was like, I still say best $7 therapy there is, because it really just let me get out a bunch of stuff. Do I care if anybody listens to that? No. But I was like, this is something that for whatever reason rattled my cage. And I'm like, I want to document that my cage is rattled here, and just talked about it, kind of got it out. It was like, all right, I can go to bed now. So, that's one of those where I've never thought of even trying to monetize that show. It's just me. I remember once I did an episode about the truth about teenage boys, and I had a parent say, I'm going to let my daughter listen to that. She's like, because she's starting to be interested in boys. And I was basically like, oh yeah, we are, they have one thing on their mind, and when they get it, they will move on. It's like, this is the truth, And so I was just there kind of like you, I just want to impart wisdom. And this is the beauty of, anybody 50 and above. You got some life experience and you got some lessons learned, and you kind of want to share with somebody so that they don't have the same issues that you ran into. And so I think it's a great premise for a show. And as Jim was saying, maybe record a couple, start a timer somewhere, because like you said, you started that one show to help people get into the game. And, after a while, you're like, that's a little too much. So you might want to start a timer as you're recording these and go, okay, how long did it take? And then kind of figure out from soup to nuts, what's it going to take to do an episode, and then go, oh, okay, so that took whatever, 5 hours to do that episode. Do I have 5 hours a week to do this? And you go, no. Well, guess what? You're not doing a weekly show. And, so then you're like, okay, maybe I'll go every other week, or, maybe I'll do it on a whenever I get it done schedule. And the only part of that is like every Friday, this is how I party. I go to Walmart, I do grocery shopping, and I listen to Podcast 2.0. That's because they release every Friday. And it just so happens that's what I'm doing Friday. And when I go, I'm like, oh, cool, Adam and Dave, click. And so when you're on a schedule that isn't regular, you kind of lose the ability to be part of someone's routine. Okay. But on the other hand, I remember when Ray Ortega used to do the Podcaster Studio before he did the one with me and Daniel. And he had a really kind of, whenever I get to it, schedule. And when I saw there was a new episode from Ray, I instantly ran and got it, because I knew Ray only turned on the mic when he had something to say. So that's the kind of bonus side of having a not so, consistent schedule, is when it does come out, you're like, oh, this is new. So in the end, just kind of do a little, research on how much time you got, because you've done that second show. So you've been there, done that. So that'll probably help in that. So
your thoughts, Todd? Anything resonate with you there?
Yeah, I'm glad you guys told me that, because this, like your show, Dave, it is kind of therapy as well. I'm kind of getting out and reliving past thoughts and experiences and lessons I learned, things about reminiscing with my dad. Yeah. And I honestly don't know how you made it through that last Building a Better Dave. That must have been tough. It was tough to do. But yeah, I got inspired because a lot of my community, which I use Discord, and I know it's ugly as sin, the Discord people, the younger people, I've lived their lives. I know what they're going through. And that's what it kind of inspired me to come up with this podcast. And I actually did a podcast with my older, he's no longer with me, podcast host. What was called Playing Favorites, where we talked about our favorite things in life. People really love that. But then when my host went away, people are like, where was that show, Playing Favorites? I love that show. So I'm not worried about monetizing or anything, but my process is going to be write the script, put it in my Medium blog, make a YouTube video. I know that's a contentious thing about being on video or not.
It's fine.
Yeah.
I just bought a teleprompter.
I always say, dude, if you want to be on video, be on video. It's the thing that always kills me. And somebody goes, well, I want to do this podcast. And they tell me what the idea is. And I'm like, that's amazing. And they're like, yeah, I can't do it. And I'm like, why? And they're like, I don't want to be on video. So if you want to be on video, dude,
I don't exactly have the face for video, but if people can deal with me, I'll keep checking it out. So, but I want to take any more time. I realize your show's getting toward an end here. So I've just been bugging me, and when actually your first guest who came on kind of inspired me to give it another shot and try to hop on. Yeah. So I think
there you go, man.
Glad you did. Glad you did.
Mad respect to you guys.
Do you have a domain yet?
Stay after it, Todd.
I don't have a domain yet. I don't want to actually release the title of the show because it's hasn't been registered yet. There is no show like this on. There is no show like this. I've already checked all the Googles and stuff. Yeah. But I do want to do. I didn't know if Podpage does like a bulk deal with multiple podcasts, because I want to do a Podpage setup.
They don't.
But
They have you can have one account with multiple shows, so you don't have to
okay.
have 37 logins.
Oh,
But
okay.
every show has to have a plan associated with it. So,
I
um,
use so much from Podpage. My voicemail systems, everything is the hub goes through that website. I mean, what you guys do over there is fantastic. I love that you guys still do that,
yeah,
and it's well worth what I pay every year for it. So
beautiful. Thank you, man.
thanks, guys.
Yep.
Thanks for jumping in.
Thanks for
Good to see
jumping
Much
in.
you.
love.
Good luck.
Absolutely.
Take
Yeah.
care.
Keep us posted.
And
Keep us posted, Todd.
yeah,
I will.
I see. Dan said the 3-part series on the Pinkertons he just released was recorded in one afternoon for all 3 episodes, and afterwards he goes, "I was done." Like that's
He
it.
is a better man than me. 4
Yeah.
hours, he said later. That
Yeah.
session was 4 hours and 44 minutes long. Like, that is a long time to be talking on a mic. Now, if it's an engaging conversation, it goes
Yeah.
pretty fast. All of a sudden, you know,
Oh,
you're like, and listen, Dan, I'm surprised you have a guest that would put up with 4 hours and 45 minutes of recording. That's a
that's
lot
true.
of time to ask for someone. Now, yeah, I mean, it's just a long time. We tried, Micah, one of my old co-hosts, we tried recording these quick 15-minute sessions. And at 10, she broke. Like, she's like, I can't do this anymore. They're all starting to sound the same. They're all starting, you know, it's just, and so we kind of said, okay, we'll do 7 at a time. That seems to be like what works to keep us fresh on that. 4 hours and 44 minutes. Yikes. Like, hats off to you, Dan. That's a long time. I don't know if I could go that long. I'd get sleepy and weepy for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, and for me, especially if I was talking to the guest or whatever, I mean, I record my episode on Sunday, but I basically have done all my planning, Monday through Saturday. And so like tomorrow, it's the question of the month. And it was funny because I was so jazzed about my last episode that I forgot it was question of the month week. And I was like, I was all talking about how you should have a newsletter for your podcast. And I was like, all right, I just realized it's question of the month week. We're going to do that next week. Meanwhile, back to newsletters. And that was just my passion kind of came through. But I record it and then I stop for lunch. And then I come back and I'll, listen to it and maybe throw in some sound effects or whatever. And then I export it. And then from there, it's writing the show notes, which can be like this next one for a question of the month. Show notes, easily an hour, because I still have people that go, and my website is I'm like, okay, so now I got to slow it down or whatever to figure out what the show notes are. So because I always want to link back to anybody who contributed to that. And so, yeah, it's one of those things where by the end of the day, I started at noon and now it's midnight. So did it take me 12 hours to make a podcast? No, because there were a lot of breaks in there. But if I had to do it back to like just through the whole thing, on one hand, you get the creative juices going, but that's the problem. You get the adrenaline going and everything like that. So when you are done, there is that kind of just, letdown that comes in. And so I can't imagine having to then turn around and go, okay, let's do another one. That'd be,
Yeah, we couldn't do another 90 minutes. Like, I'd be like, nope, no. I mean, the 90 we do is actually probably a little long, to be honest. We could probably do this in 60 just fine. We've chosen, for whatever reason, we continue to do 90. We've done some 60s.
Yeah.
They're fun. They're fast. They are
Yeah.
fast. Like, all of a sudden you're like, what? Where'd it go?
Yeah.
So 90 works for us. I think we're all built a little bit different. David in the chat was saying how Hardcore History has these really long 6 to 10 hour podcasts, right? We're all built a little bit different. As far, if you can sit down and record for 6 to 10 hours, God, more power to you as you get that done. And it's probably not one recording session, right?
Yeah.
And they're not released every week that way. So who knows how that's being put together, but wowza.
Yeah.
Wowza.
Bred to Perfection. So Kenny saying I had one guest on and we recorded it for a 10-hour session.
Oh, good.
Before that, we had an 8-hour session and another 5-hour session.
Man.
And that's where I go, just remember, a podcast is a conversation with the boring parts removed, because it's hard to stay like 10 hours of brilliant stuff is like, really?
You can do it though. Some
Yeah,
people can.
definitely
Some people
possible.
can. Yeah.
So, we got a quick one we can throw in here. Episode cover photos. They say we normally do a special cover photo for each episode for our podcast, but I tried for the first time on our last episode, and the downloads were double what they normally were. Was this just a coinky-dink, or is this an episode-specific photo really that important for each download? I don't know about doubling your downloads, but I know it makes you stand out compared to other people that don't. So it's not a mandatory thing, but I know I need to go in and look because I hardly ever look at my stats from Spotify. In Spotify, they have, you can go in and see how far people listen and blah, blah, blah. And, oh man, scrappy podcast marketing guy, Jesse something, I can't remember his last name, but anyway, he was saying how there's some kind of new stats in there. And one of them is how many times was your episode shown and how many times did people click on it? And the reason they're going to click is your title and your artwork. And so if the artwork, could somehow push them over the edge, then yeah, maybe episode artwork could help. Now in the future of podcasting, we have the same artwork for all of them. And I actually am going to reach out to Daniel and go, can I get one where I can put in a title at the top just to kind of keep the brand? But to me, it's easy. Make a template, go in, change the color, the background or whatever. Jeremy Ennis, thank you, Rich. And then just change the title and the background or whatever. So it looks new, but it's really just the same old stuff rearranged. So I don't know, Jim.
Yeah, there's some evidence that Google is indexing your photos, your whatever the graphics are. And if it's the same all the time, it treats it differently than if it's original. And so there could be, listen, it's hard to diagnose this from a question and we don't know the person, right?
Right.
But there could be evidence in there that the new album art got picked up and was exposed a little more often than just your regular album art because Google is saying this is new. And so sometimes it'll show it more. Listen, that is the most generic statement. And I have no idea if any of that's happening or not. But there is some, we've moved to Gallup. We've moved to get as much original art in our stuff as possible. And so we actually came up with our own art style, if that makes sense. We have this way of doing it that, we had been using stock images for for the longest time. And there was some evidence that those stock images were being downplayed by Google. And so I don't know if that's a bad. I don't do individual album art. Somebody had mentioned in chat, if you're going to do that, listen, it's another thing to do. If you're good at it, yeah, I'd say do it right now. That would be my advice. If you can do it and do it fast and you like doing it and it looks good, awesome. Of course, beauty is always in the eye of the beholder. There we go. So, your stuff, don't let anybody say your stuff doesn't look good because that's your call, right? Whether it looks good or not. But yeah, I think maybe Dave, that might be worth trying. I think we should all try it and see what kind of results you get. Will the first one take off like this? I don't know, but I don't know. For those of you out there in chat, here's the problem. If you're doing it now, you'll never know because your numbers are based on that happening all the time. We almost need some podcasters who don't individualize to start to see if it changes the equation.
Yeah. Jeremy has this really cool report called the Podcast Marketing Trends. And what I was trying to find is he is now, as far as I know, accepting submissions for the 2025 version of this. And it takes about 10 minutes to go through it. It's a really good report. And I was trying to find the link to the new one, and I'm all over his website. I cannot find it. So I know I have it somewhere because I've seen it on social and a couple other places, but he runs the Podcast Marketing Academy. And then he and the guy Jackson from transistor.fm. Boy, names are just not my strong suit, but they do a show that's a little podcast rodeo show, kind of ish, where I think they call it, it's not an audit. It's something, but they go over people's podcasts and review it. And so that's fun. Man, I can see his face. Something Jackson from Transistor. It'll come to me later, of course. But with that, oh, wait a minute. Dan says, I just started doing some custom cover art. Haven't seen a big difference, but it's only been a month, not a lot of data there. Yeah, I'm not sure it would make a huge difference. I just know it is definitely icing on the cupcake. And sometimes if there's already icing on the cupcake and you add just a little more, it's like, do we really need that much
No,
icing?
it's always better. It's more icing, always better. Always. Oh, are we talking about cupcakes or podcasts?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Randy says on his V for V music show has the main cover art in the middle of the episode number and a date around it. So it keeps his branding center, but he changes the number for each episode.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Elsie does that on the feed where they have like 3 or 4 different pictures of her and Rob. And so they have the number and they have a thing for the title, and then they'll swap out the picture of those two. And so it's branding wise, it looks great because everything's very similar to the last one, but yet it's different enough to where you go, oh, this is different than the last one. So you can kind of tell them apart. And I just know if you go into, I don't know, whatever app you're using, if it's all the same thing, and then it's kind of like, okay, it doesn't look bad, right? And then you see somebody who has something different. You're like, oh, this one kind of looks, different. And sometimes different is good, I guess, if it looks good, and if not. And it goes back to, and you brought this up, when you say I'm going to add one thing, okay, what are you not going to do? Because you just added 5 minutes to your process. So, and that's where you had Justin Jackson. Thank you, Dan. I knew it started. I'm like, it's between Justin and Jeremy. I'm like, all these J's, my brain couldn't take it. And good guy. I met him at a couple different events. And Transistor they're on the Captivate kind of business model where you can have as many shows, as many episodes for one price. I just think you get more downloads at Captivate before your bill goes up. But I've never used Transistor. I've seen videos of their stats, and I know they just did a thing, I think it was last week, where now Transistor websites, so you'd have to be using their website. If somebody comments on Blue Sky, that Blue Sky comment shows up on your Transistor website. So they're trying to do kind of a cross-app comments, but the commenting tool is Blue Sky. So if you like Blue Sky, you're like, oh, cool. And if you think Blue Sky is awful, you're like, I never use that. And welcome to Facebook and every social media platform. Where
that's not a new idea.
There is
not
no
a new idea.
And I always say, be careful. Anytime you add comments to your website, who's moderating that? Because somebody's not going to agree, not going to agree with you and that whole 9 yards. And so I'm assuming everybody on Blue Sky is somehow, going to be vetted out. So not just anybody can comment on your stuff. But
yeah, that's an old idea. I mean, that we've brought those things in before. And so I don't know. I just don't know why we have to be so mean to each other on these things.
There's a
you
lot
think about all those comments and like, why do we need to be so mean to each other?
Yeah. I tuned into Facebook. I need to go watch the meeting between Trump and Putin and JD. What's his name?
Oh,
I haven't seen it yet, but man, the internet was on fire last night. I was like, all right, I got to go watch this and make my own opinion. But speaking of opinions, what kind of opinion are you sharing on Home Gadget Geeks this week?
Yeah, no, right on. Jay Franzi, who's a listener to the show here, is on my show. We spent some time. He bought a new 2025 Honda Accord Hybrid. And so we talked about some of the technology and some of those gadgetry that is now in those vehicles. So yeah, it's a fun show. It was great to have Jay on. It's not available yet, but it will be by the time our other listeners are listening to this. Check it out today, homegadgetgeeks.com.
Yeah, and on the School of Podcasting, it is Question of the Month. And the question of the month was, what's your top podcasting pet peeve. This is something I usually do in January, and I kind of pushed it back a bit. And so we'll be hearing what those pet peeves are. And then the question will be like, are you doing those? And if so, are you going to keep doing them? Or is it just part of your show's, charm or whatever it is? So maybe, no, I want to have bad audio where my audience has to constantly grab the volume knob. That would be a bad thing to do, but, maybe that's your thing. Who knows? But thanks to the chat room. Thanks to everyone who hopped in and asked a question. That's always, I don't know, to me, it makes it more fun. And we'll be back. Yep, we will. We'll be back next week with another fun-filled episode of Ask the Podcast Coach. Yep, and I can't find the off button. Isn't this fun? Because I moved everything over to the teleprompter. There we go. Now we're done and finished.